I would now like to invite Jorien, and Jorien is going to introduce the next session of our program. So over to Jorien van Breukelen. Dr. Jorien van Breukelen.
I don't think I'm going to get tired of hearing that. Well, welcome to the very first panel session of the weekend. It's called Allies in Brisbane. In the interests of time, I'm going to be a very strict chair, so apologies. We've got 3 presentations. First, we've got Roger Marks with Airfields in Queensland during World War II. Then we've got David Jones with the British Fleet in Brisbane. Our panellists, can I please invite you to come up? Roger, you will come and take the lectern because it seems that we do not have roving mics, unfortunately, so you're going to have to use this one here. David and Megan, if you could take your seats up here, and then I will sit over here, and I've got flashcards. I will tell you when you've got 5 minutes left, 2 minutes, and 1 minute. 1 minute means a wrap up. Sorry to be strict. So what we'll do is we'll have the 3 presentations, and then we'll have a Q&A session for everyone together at the end. So please keep your questions to the end, and please keep your questions short. No long comments, please. Keep them for the break. Oh my God. I hear an oh my God there, Paul, but I've been to many academic conferences, and it is one of my pet peeves. Questions over.
Good on you. Yeah.
Like the fun ride out of it. Yes. Roger, where are you?
I'm here.
You're there. Excellent. Over to you.
Are you giving me the start straight away?
Go.
Good morning all, and due recognition to all dignitaries. I'll skip the woman worries me about the time. Okay. 30 years ago, my wife Jenny and I self-published a book, Queensland Airfields. World War II, 50 years on. And we promised ourselves we would never do the printing bit again. So when this was sold out, it became this. So everything in this is in that. And not only is everything in that in here, but I want to concentrate today on the amplifications that have happened since that and since the CD of this stuff. Essentially, I'm not going to, David Horner, I thank you very much for the general outline you gave, because I'm not going to try and tell people about individual airfields in Queensland. In my book, I gave 60 of the airfields illustrated text. The other 130 odd, and you'll be surprised at the number, the other 130 odd, they get recognition because in some way they happened. Many cases it was the need for a strip here and a strip there for whatever reason, and they were cleared. Some were graded and advanced beyond that, but some never saw an airfield. Sorry, never saw an aircraft. But they had their little place in my history. I call them my sacred sites. Now, I'm going to run a short tour on Google Earth because one of the great benefits of feedback from purchasers of the book and so on was from a retired airline pilot who said, Roger, I know a bit about how to put a KMZ file together. And I said, what are you talking about? So he explained to me that by putting markers on Google Earth and gaining them appropriately, you can feed that material on to other viewers. So he kindly set his idea of where the 190 odd strips were, and I said, okay, fine, I want to moderate that so that the spot is clearly where the airfield was in the World War II period. Sometimes the current day strip is different. This is a general idea of where the short tour through Google Earth is going to go shortly. The larger white circles are some of the airfields that I rate in my 60 that get illustrated text in the book. And the smaller ones are some of the lesser level 2 stuff. Pictures were photographs extremely important in this whole exercise. And the immediate response I got from some American veterans and guidance and meeting with the late Bob Makesh in America, who at the time was with the Smithsonian Institution. He knew his way through American archives, and he was able to feed me photographs like the one on the screen at the moment there, like the next one. Both, the first one at Garbett, the second here at Eagle Farm. He knew where to get these photographs to show me, otherwise I did not know about them. But he gave me an incentive to someday investigate further the American Archive holding of the photographs that were taken by US services photographers when they were here during the Second World War. These are photos from our own Australian archives. This is a particular photograph that came from a veteran who said, when I was leaving Iron Range in 1946, I souvenired the aerial photo mosaic of the airfield off the ops hut wall. I said, right, where is it? Oh, here it is. I cut it in half, put it in my kit bag at the time, but it's now in 2 pieces. I have the photo with me here today. It is important because it shows many of the B-26 Mark Marauder aircraft that the 22nd Bomb Group flew into Australia in March of 1942, echoing the flight of Kingsford Smith in 1928. So Iron Range will come up for mention shortly. I will close after I've gone through the examples of the companion PDFs. It was one thing to generate a KMZ file that showed where the 190 odd sites were, but that was pretty useless unless I took the opportunity to feed into those individual PDFs information that you could never get into the book.
At Horn Island, which was bombed many times. Not so for the others. See, there's the tip. Then sweep down to Eagle Farm. The yellow star marker shows the WWII location close to Brisbane Airport of today. Back north to Iron Range, now known as Lockhart River. Of the wartime 4, Gordon Strip survives. It was from IR the first offensive missions were mounted from our mainland. Now to Rockhampton. By 1944, thousands of US troops had trained in numerous camps round here, ahead of the action in islands to our north. This is not that far from Shoalwater Bay, synonymous with our international military training of today. Northwest now to Inverleigh, up near Gulf of Carpentaria, between Corumba and Burketown. Over east to Stockwood. It started as a gravel strip in Dalrymple Road, which used to be a real stock route. Between here and Garbett, now Townsville International, shared with the RAAF, the hugely important US Townsville Air Depot was constructed, more later. Down south now to Cecil Plains on the Darling Downs, west of Toowoomba, south of Dalby. The wartime layout is still evident. Out west now to Thargomindah, in the news for disastrous flooding back around April this year. This is a level 2 World War II marker, significantly west of present-day airport, an island respite for townsfolk flood time. Back north to Cooktown Civil, another Level 2 site. To its near west, a new field known as the Mission Strip grew up because Civil had become outmoded. Down now to Archerfield, well known to Brisbaneites. Then northwest to Warrior, another Level 2 strip southwest of Charters Towers. More on it later. To Bundaberg now, where I did my initial primary schooling. This was RAF's number 8 SFTS, Service Flying Training School, until December 1944. It then became home to some units of the NEIAF, Netherlands East Indies Air Force. Then up to Mount Hedlow, between Rocky and Yeppoon. Hedlow's grass strips were home to light aircraft performing artillery spotting duties, etc. Up Cape York, now to my mystery field, Elliot, more on it later. And now to Maryborough, which was a WAGS, W-A-G-S, a wireless air gunner / navigator training school. Interestingly, in 1945, Maryborough was home to a Royal Naval Air Service unit flying Corsairs from aircraft carriers. That completes my 12-site tour, representative of the 190-odd airfields of Queensland World War II.
Right, now, I'll treat Horn Island first, and again, very quickly, because the girl starts putting in markers. Typically, these are elements of the companion PDFs. This is what I call a RAF landing ground serviceability drawing, issued periodically and important for their dates and the detail of what was developed. I don't expect you to be able to read that. These are meant for study, really. This is a work as executed drawing. Never anything that could have been put in a book, but important if you're studying the exercise. This is a DCA, Department of Civil Aviation data sheet. This is the mapping of the day. And a photograph, a paired photograph, which shows actually bomb cratering on Horn Island. We go now to Eagle Farm. There are 2 bits remaining at Eagle Farm from those days. They're ringed, the Allison test cells and Hangar 7. And you'll hear more about Hangar 7 from another speaker. This is a 44 photograph overlaid on Google Earth, and it can be varied to show, as I just did then, that the ringed ones are the only bits that are there today. This is the serviceability drawing of 1942. Compare that to the end of 1943. A whole new runway and extension of existing has occurred. This is the mapping of the day. No indication of any airfield. This is a flyby by a Japanese Oscar fighter, which you'll hear about more from the ATIOU at the Hangar 7 exercise. A photograph from the top of one of the hangars at Eagle Farm. Hangar 7. Bob McKesh visited Hangar 7 in 1989. Hangar 7 has been heritage listed recently? No, sometime back. The Brisbane City Council are our custodians for this Hangar 7, and they spent considerable funds making the building safe again. These things, these igloos, had a design life of 2 years, and lots more money though is needed to make sure that can be used as a community heritage centre. This is a comparison of where it was then, yellow, compared to red today. Iron Range, now known as Lockhart River. These are the serviceability drawings fitted together the first little strip, which harks to the 1938 days when a biplane service did operate. The next one down is Gordon, which is the only one that survives today. And the next Claudy strip was used extensively, and it was paired. Sorry, I'll just go back to that one there. That's a Australian archive of Gordon strip. When I put the book together 30 odd years ago, I was able to get a Mariba air survey people to replicate that strip. So there you see the result of 47 odd years in terms of growth. You cannot even see Claudy strip far in the background. These are a couple of Australian archive photos, Gordon on the left and Claudy on the right. The extreme right-hand paired strip on Claudy is the fourth strip, which was graded, prepared, but never taken further because the need disappeared. Incidentally, the need for Iron Range was the fear that Port Moresby could fall, and if so, there was a need for a base on the Australian mainland from which offensive operations could be undertaken. The US 46th Engineer Regiment came to the Townsville area around March, April, and they are the reason why lots and lots of important fields around Townsville grew up. This is images that their veterans have provided over the years. And which said the value of a separate little booklet that I produced on Portland roads. This is a couple of more pages from that little booklet itself. Again, photographs from the 46th Engineer Veterans Association albums. Further photographs from that album. Importantly, there were aircraft on this strip while construction work was still going. This is a lineup of liberators on Gordon Strip. There was at least one horrific accident caused largely by nighttime dust and the veering of a liberator into parked aircraft. So these are photographs that, again, Bob McKesh was able to feed to me in this early scene. There are 3 blue photographs on ground at Portland Roads, where there was a jetty at the day. Extremely important because when the engineer organisation went by sea from Townsville to Portland Roads to do Iron Range, we have to move very quickly. Those are those photos. Rockhampton, importantly, Rockhampton, when you put a current photo over Google Earth, you see Lion Creek there. When the current day comes along, the strip has been extended over Lion Creek. The angle of the strip has also been altered because it was found during construction that the attempts to the tunnelings under the airstrips, under that airstrip, to provide for exploding or destroying or disrupting the airfield if the need arose, they showed themselves as troublesome spots, so the main runway was altered a little in its angle. That's a climate photo showing Rockhampton in the right hand in the far background. And this is what happens when an aircraft overran into Lion Creek. Going quickly to Inverleigh, I'll be very quick here. One of the Australian cartoonists of the day, Eric Jolliffe, was actually one of the Australian camoufleurs at Inverleigh, and he he decorated some of the huts of the day. My son and I visited in 2003. We saw some of the remnants of Inverleigh. Inverleigh, incidentally, is close to the Surrey pipeline from Century Mine through to Corregidor. We go now to Stockroot. Stockroot put the photograph on Google Earth. This is the photograph. The late Rod Cadell, who wrote a book called Wings Around Us, he actually lived throughout those years at the end of the Red Arrow. His mother had nowhere else to go. He and his daughter, he and his sister and his mother lived there. This is Townsville today. This is the serviceability drawing. That's a TriMet vertical. I'll come back to it. This is the mapping of the time. No indication of Garbutt field at all. This is the Friarall arch timber hideout that Emile Brise produced under the encouragement of American engineers in Brisbane's M.R. Honeybrook office. That's going up at Stockroot. Imagine that structure beefed up and given a roof, and that became the igloos. There, this is an Arch Frehley photo from that time. Hangar 7 is one of those several igloos. Stockroot ran its use as a strip, but as a nice piece of hard ground. Look what happens to these storage things. Okay, this is a off-base headquarters developed in the need, if the need arose. It was camouflaged heavily during the time. That's where that building is now, and that's it from today. Cecil Plains. I'll have to skip through Cecil Plains. That's another form of camouflage, concealment only, no protection from bomb blast. Cooktown Civil, is that it here?
No, continue, just continue.
I hope you give me a couple more minutes for this.
Just continue.
I can't, this won't operate on. Okay. Okay, that's a marauder which landed into Cooktown's civil drone at the time. It was miraculous that it could even be stopped in the short length things. And because of that, not only because of that, but the other present need, a more modern field at Cooktown grew up. Archerfield. That photo I found at the National Library of Australia in Canberra, but there was no date to it. It just said decoy aircraft Archerfield. The next day I found some RAF survey negative register, which importantly listed lots of those photographs of the period and gave me the date. Another photo showed parts of Eagle Farm, Archerfield. The blue rigged one here is where that's the structure built in the quarry at Archerfield. The stuff of legends over the years, of course. It was never even taken to completion. Eagle Farm, Warrior. Look, I'm going to skip Warrior. I really only was in because it had 3 names. It was customary in this time, searching for new sites, to name the site according to the nearest railway stop. And Warrior and Karoon were 2 spots. They show on the mapping of the time. So eventually, Karoon was taken. But that's their field. It was graded, not used. Again. And it lives, the field itself is next to a station which called Vale, and I suspect that the Vale people do use it today. Bundaberg, where I did my primary school. The mapping of the day, the airfield site there, the Lancasters to a number did visit Bundaberg. We lived at 82 Roland Street. My dad doubled 8-year-old me on his bike out to line up and go through that Lancaster in 1944. This is where we lived, 82 Roland Street, across the road. One of the NEI family, sorry, the NEI Air Force families lived. We played with their kids. We understood that when they left in 46, they were going to an uncertain future. In the background there, I show Blue Arrow, where there is still a butcher shop, where Mum sent one of my sisters to get some suicide meat. The butcher later told us that she asked for suicide meat. and at the top left is my identity disc from my school days when we had to do our LA trench drills. I had intended to have it around my neck today, but I couldn't find it. Bundaberg had a strip of the Burnham River where planes could land. I heard one did, but I didn't until years later find the photograph. Mount Hedlow. Now Mount Hedlow was shown on the 1946 map, and I thought, this will be photographs from 1944. But when I paid the money, got the prints, they were all 1941. This is one of the record plans now in the holdings of the Australian Archives. And it's terribly important, and it's in my Rockhampton booklet, which means that a lot of the photos that were generated then, only some of them made it into the current day NARA's major holding that I've explored, the Signal Corps collection. The photos that didn't make it into that collection still live at Australian Archives, and I intend in my project to bring home these images from American Archives, that those that were culled by them we retain. Why? Because some of them show and name Australian civilians working for the Americans during that period in Rockhampton. I did my mystery site. I only had two things. Number one, the photo with a date, 1950. I had nothing to tell me where it was. Sometime later I found a flight diagram which showed me that it's up Cape York by the Overland Telegraph line. It didn't tell me anything else. So at least I was able, from this detail, to mark out the necessaries of that photo and drift it along the Tobo maps of the day. And so now I know where that strip is, but I still don't know when it was actually started, because it's photographed in 1950, overgrown, cleared but not advanced. Maryborough. I haven't shown two photos of Maryborough. They are of the Royal Naval Air Service Corsairs that were in Maryborough during the later stage of the war. I go now to my dedication page in Queensland Airfields, where I have a recitation which I'm going to play to you.
With arm outstretched, the toy keeps pace, abreast of Tango Zulu climbing clear on runway 12. When late in bed he hears again that roar, he rests, and sleep descending, the question teeters on consciousness.
Don't planes sleep too?
Of course they do.
Dad says with mind extended, chessing out the coming day. Those parts should come and that will be done. Make damn sure, I'll say.
And on the way, you can take me to the airport. Dad, are you listening?
Don't worry your father now. Finish your breakfast. You'll be late for the bus.
What say I take him, Helen? You and Jim are busy. I can show him the hangars. If old George is still out there, we'll drive the perimeter, throw a few shots at the birds. The visit'll do me good. You know, I remember in 45.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roger, and apologies for being such a mean chair. You did get some extra minutes due to our tech issues. I would like to invite David to join us, or to actually take my spot here. This means that we all lose a bit of lunch and go into whatever we're up to.
Well, as I was saying, with the war coming towards a conclusion in Europe, Great Britain was very keen to make a meaningful contribution to the defeat of Japan and the recovery of territory lost to the enemy. And the sooner they got into the action, the better. So for this purpose, the Royal Navy established the British Pacific Fleet. Was formed in November 1944 under the command of Admiral Sir Bruce Fraser, and he arrived in Sydney on the 17th of December 1944. That would be the main base for the fleet, but he then moved forward to Manus Island, which would be a forward base, which would be used by the fleet as they were further advanced. Brisbane would play an important part as a supply and repair centre. Just wondering where. Oh, here it is. The British Pacific Fleet consisted of a balanced task force of the most modern aircraft carriers, which were supported by the latest escort of battleships, cruisers and destroyers. And they would be integrated with the US fleet as a task force out of 3 or 4 that would be actually on the battlefront. They were also supported by a fleet train, which was all the supply ships which came in behind the fleet, but were in safe waters, but close enough so that the combat warships could come and be replenished with the minimum of disruption to their pressure on the enemy. This photo shows you a tanker belonging to the fleet train, and this was one of the Pacific Fleet tankers, the Dingledale, about to commence a refuelling at sea. So the fleet train consisted of repair and supply ships, tankers, aircraft ferries, transports, and a range of other auxiliaries which supported the warships. The Americans would only accept the support of the British if they were self-supporting. So the fleet train was essential for that purpose. And it was quite a challenge for Admiral Fraser and his staff to establish the fleet train. The Royal Navy had never operated before at such a great distance from its shore bases in Australia to the combat zone off Japan. So a lot of ships were needed to be able to keep that shuttle going. So they had to find them from all sorts of places. There had been a lot of attrition amongst merchant ships, but they had to co-opt a few of them from different nations as well. And they had to also learn the task of efficiently replenishing warships at sea. So this was quite a challenge, but it was important for us in Brisbane because Brisbane was the base the Australian base for the fleet train. They would be coming here for replenishment of stores, oil and the rest, and then moving forward into, and also repairs and maintenance. So as with the Americans, we welcomed the British with open arms, and at that stage, of course, we were part of the British Empire, and this was family to us. So the fleet's general depot and supply base in Brisbane was named HMS Furneaux, and naval shore bases, stone frigates, were given the name HMS and their own name. So Furneaux was the name of the shore base. Furneaux organised repairs, had a pool of personnel to be drafted. It had storage and distribution of supplies, and the oil tanks at Windsor, which we used for the tankers for the refuelling of the warships at sea. So Furneaux was commissioned on the 1st of April 1945, but the commanding officer had arrived in January. And as I mentioned before, there was a lot of urgency in getting the British Pacific Fleet ships to sea and getting the organisation set up to support them. And they succeeded in doing that. They took over facilities that had been vacated by the Americans, as well as arranging for the acquisition of a few more of their own. One building which was built especially for the Royal Navy was a victualling stores depot and new farm. It was commenced in 1944, progress was a bit slow at that stage, but it was able to be in full operation by April 1945. Of all the photos I have taken down the river, that's about the best that shows the victualling store depot, which became HMS Norton until, I suppose, the early this century when the Navy moved to Bulimba. The submarine is more recent to the war, so it's a post-war submarine. Brisbane also played an important role with the Fleet Air Arm in supporting the aircraft of the fleet. New aircraft were shipped in from the UK and the US to Brisbane. They were assembled and tested here, then shipped out to the fleet by a shuttle of aircraft of escort carriers, which would then unload them. They'd move on to the main aircraft carriers to keep up to numbers. And here you see HMS Slinger, which was an escort carrier used as a ferry carrier, berthed at Brett's Wharf in Hamilton, and you can see over there Bulimba and the curve of the river around Newstead that goes to New Farm. So there were two mobile air bases established in Brisbane to support the Fleet Air Arm aircraft here. The first one was open, the sailors for that arrived in March 1945. It was named HMS Nabsford at Archerfield. So they occupied 4 of the big igloo hangars there, and they would assemble the aircraft shipped in from overseas. They would test them and they would repair damaged aircraft. So here you get a range of the kind of aircraft types that were used by the fleet, the British Pacific Fleet. A Corsair on the left, a Barracuda in the middle, and a Hellcat on the right. There was a the sailors were accommodated in the former munitions factory at Rocklea, and later on a second a second mobile air base arrived, HMS Nabriki, and they were established at Meander to do mechanical servicing and maintenance. So the British Pacific Fleet went to sea, went into action at the end of March 1945, supporting the invasion of Okinawa. Now, Okinawa proved to be a very bitter campaign. The Japanese reacted very strongly with kamikaze attacks. And the British Pacific Fleet aircraft struck at Japanese positions in the Sakishima Islands between Formosa and Japan. And but they suffered kamikaze attacks. All 4 of the British carriers that were there were struck by kamikazes. They caused considerable casualties in men and aircraft, but the aircraft carriers themselves were little damaged. They possessed an armoured flight deck, in contrast with the American carriers, which had a timber flight deck. And the American carriers, of which 5 of them during Okinawa were struck by kamikazes, were as often as not put out of action because of the fires that were caused. The British Pacific Fleet, where am I? The fleet returned to Australia after 2 months of fighting at Okinawa throughout April and May, and they returned here for a replenishment period in June 1945. So this proved to be one of the busiest times of the war on the Brisbane River, with 32 warships in port for most of that month. 32 different ones, and they ranged in size from the depot and supply ships, depot and repair ships, HMS Montclair, which you see there, the flagship of the Fort Fleet train, and the artifacts, down to minesweepers. These 2, the Montclair and artifacts, used to be transatlantic liners, down to minesweepers, which were mainly Australian and part of the Australian contribution to the British Pacific Fleet. There were 2 dry docks in Brisbane. South Brisbane Dry Dock, which is the home of the Queensland Maritime Museum. It maintained escort vessels, and the Diamantina was typical of the kind of escort vessels that were maintained, that belonged to the British Pacific Fleet, which provided escort to the fleet train. Minesweepers and submarines there. King Cross Dock at Combsley, opposite Hamilton, was completed in just under 2 years as part of Queensland's war effort, and it could handle any vessel capable of navigating the Brisbane River. And amongst them were 2 aircraft carriers, this being one of them, HMS Unicorn. And you can see aircraft on the deck there, even though it was a maintenance carrier. It was used for operations earlier in the war. But the dry docks were kept in very much demand throughout the war period. But the fleet returned to battle on the 17th of July 1945, where the front line had moved closer to Japan, and they were operating out of off the coast of Honshu, one of the home islands of Japan, making strikes there mainly by aircraft, but also some shore bombardments as well by the battleships. But a month later, Japan capitulated, and a representative squadron was left behind to be present for the surrender ceremony that would take place later, and then Admiral Fraser signed the surrender document on behalf of Great Britain. General Sir Thomas Blaney signed it on behalf of Australia. But there was unfinished business to deal with. Rabaul had been bypassed during the war, and there was a big contingent of Japanese servicemen there under its orders, almost 140,000 of them. So we needed to put on a good show to emphasise the surrender of those troops. So an aircraft carrier, HMS Glory, was made available for the purpose, and the surrender ceremony was carried on its flight deck by Lieutenant General Vernon Sturdy on the 6th of September 1945.